don't know what it is about doing nice things for your siblings without expecting anything in return. I don't understand what about that is so difficult. It really irritates me, and it has irritated me that I let the flesh get in the way of me doing some super simple tasks, like giving my one of my siblings something that they asked for from the kitchen. One of the most irritating things growing up was when we're all sitting in the living room and we're all watching TV, and then I get up to go to the kitchen to get an ice cream or a water bottle or some type of snack. I come back into the living room and my dad or my brothers ask for one. They ask like, "Hey, can you get me one?" And obviously with my dad, if my dad or mom asks that, then obviously it's natural if you don't want to get in trouble to get them whatever you got as well. But when my brothers would ask me for something, I'd be like, "No, you go get it. You get it yourself. I'm not your slave. I'm not your servant." And even when we mustered up the courage to get something for our siblings, we would be met with an inevitable, "That's right." And what I mean by that is I would go get them a water bottle or an ice cream from the freezer, and I would hand it to them, and then they'd be like, "That's right." And it was one of the most irritating exchanges that we would have throughout our teenage years, because for some reason we felt like they defeated us, that they told us to do something for them and we did it, and now they're better than us or they're the boss. And I experienced a shift in doing things like that for my siblings, for family members, for friends after I was saved. So within the first couple of years of being saved, a lot of that changed. So when my brothers or my parents, or specifically my brothers, whenever they would ask for something, I don't know if it was growing in maturity or the fact that I saw service in a different way, being a believer now, but I would just do it without a fight, without being scared that they're going to say, "That's right," and make me out to look like the slave or someone less than them. And it was like that for a long time, up until just recently. We were watching the Super Bowl at a family's house, and at some point in the middle, my older brother asked me for a water bottle from the cooler. I was already standing up, I was watching the game, and then for some reason I didn't want to. We don't spend that much time in person. My brother lives in Arizona, so we don't really spend a lot of time together, but when we do, it's great. And for some reason, this wasn't the first time that he had asked me for something over the course of the weekend that we were hanging out. And so when he asked me that, my flesh got in the way, and I was like, no, I'm not going to go get that water bottle for you. And he was like, "Come on, like, why? You're already standing up. You're right there." And I didn't want to. And my flesh got in the way so much, and I let it win so much that I even told him what I tell my students when they ask to go to the restroom or sharpen their pencil or whatever. And if they don't say please, then I tell them, "As soon as you remember your manners." And then they rephrase the question, say please, and then I let them go to the bathroom or whatever. And so I actually told that to my brother. I was like, "Hey, you know what I say to my students when they ask me for something?" And he was like, "No." And I said, "Well, I say, as soon as you remember your manners," trying to prompt my brother to just say please, right? But even then, that in and of itself, I'm trying to make myself the boss to my brother who's asking or requesting something very simple. And so when that happened, I was immediately struck with conviction by the Holy Spirit. I still didn't go get him the water bottle, but I was ashamed that I had gotten to that point this far away from having been saved. I've been saved for 10 years, and I'm still holding on to that for some reason, not wanting to do these simple tasks for my siblings. And not too long after that, a couple days later, I listened to the sermon on service, and the Holy Spirit used that particular message and this particular passage that he mentioned in that message to really strike a chord in me that is essentially the motivation as to why I'm making this video right now. And that was Mark 9, the Gospel of Mark chapter 9, verses 33 through 41. And I'll just read it here. Verse 33 says, "They came to Capernaum, and when he was in the house, he began to question them, 'What were you discussing on the way?' But they, the disciples, kept silent, for on the way they had discussed with one another which of them was the greatest." So here we have Jesus asking them, "Hey, what were you talking about on the way over here?" And they were ashamed because they didn't say anything, and they didn't want to tell Jesus that they were just discussing which one of them was the greatest. Verse 35 continues saying, "Sitting down, he called the 12 and said to them, 'If anyone wants to be first, he shall be last of all and servant of all.'" And so Jesus, taking a child, he set him before them, and taking him in his arms, he said to them, "Whoever receives one child like this in my name receives me. And whoever receives me does not receive me, but him who sent me." So Jesus is saying, hey, if you receive a child like this, you're not necessarily receiving me, you're receiving the Father in heaven, my Father in heaven. Verse 38 says, "John said to him, 'Teacher, we saw someone casting out demons in your name.'" So obviously they're not even addressing the lesson that Jesus is trying to teach here. They automatically tried to boost their morale by saying what they say in verse 38. "Teacher, we saw someone casting out demons in your name, and we tried to prevent him because he was not following us." Verse 39 says, "But Jesus said, 'Do not hinder him, for there is no one who will perform a miracle in my name and be able soon afterward to speak evil of me. For he who is not against us is for us.'" And verse 41, "For whoever gives you a cup of water to drink because of your name as followers of Christ, truly I say to you, he will not lose his reward." And so here we have the disciples trying to go around, trying to avoid the lesson that Jesus is trying to teach him here about humble service. So much so that they bring up some random guy who was casting out demons and how they showed him that they said, "Hey, you need to stop that because you're not one of us." And Jesus comes with, "Hey, whoever is not against us is for us. So what are you doing? Stop putting yourself in this honor competition that will only boost your own egos." And so what Jesus does is that he brings up something very simple. In verse 41, "For whoever gives you a cup of water to drink because of your name as followers of Christ, truly I say to you, he will not lose his reward." And so the reason why this convicted me so much is because of that last verse of the cup of water. And here we have the disciples discussing who may be the greatest among them. They bring up how they're trying to protect the sanctity of being a disciple, of being a follower of Jesus, by talking about this guy who was trying to cast out demons in Jesus' name. Jesus corrects them, and then Jesus brings up this cup of water act to demonstrate, like, hey, you will not lose your reward if you do this simple act. And so that struck me, as you probably already have guessed it, because I refuse to bring my brother a cup of water or a water bottle. Now, yeah, it's kind of like out of context, but I feel like the Holy Spirit uses passages like this to remind us that we don't have to make simple acts like this such a big deal in such a way that it's going to hinder our Christian walks. In fact, if we get used to doing simple acts like this, people are going to recognize that, especially siblings whom you have been trying to get one over on your entire teenage life, telling them, oh, that's right. Thank you. Like, that's right. You better get me a water bottle when I ask for it, or you better get me an ice cream when I ask for it. When you make that switch of just doing what they're asking you to do, getting for them, serving them in that way, when you do that, the Lord will use simple transformations like that to capture the hearts of those who are unsaved. And it reminds me of this quote by Ian Simpkins where he says, if serving is beneath you, leading is beyond you. If you can't humble yourself enough to serve, and if you think you're above serving, then leading in any type of capacity, you're not going to be ready for. You're not ready for. And that quote struck me, along with the passage out of Mark chapter 9, along with me failing to do something super simple for a person, my brother, who I claim to love so dearly. And so we have to be careful, especially with our siblings who may or may not be saved. We have to be careful of not falling back into our old lives, because it's super easy to do that. And a good guardrail to keep ourselves from going back there is to pray for those whom we are surrounded by, especially if they're unsaved family members. Which reminds me of a quote by my friend Josh, where he says, when your prayer life goes to sleep, your past life wakes up. When your prayer life goes to sleep, your past life wakes up. And we don't want that, especially if our past life is inundated with sin and pride and arrogance like mine was, and sometimes creeps in times like this. So let this be a reminder that the only way to be great in the kingdom of heaven, the only way to be favorable in the eyes of God, is to serve like his son did. So if you truly want to please the Father in heaven, serve with a cheerful heart, serve as you are empowered by the Holy Spirit and seasoned with grace to love those who aren't necessarily entirely lovable, because that's what Jesus did for us. He served us when we least deserved it and gave us so many gifts. One of them, the main one, being the Holy Spirit, that he now guides us, empowers us to serve with a humble heart, and he makes that enjoyable. And that's the most beautiful part about this whole service thing, is that he makes it enjoyable if our heart is tethered, if our heart is tethered to his and our ears are inclined to his voice. So let us hear the word that was made flesh as we are indwelt by his Spirit, to serve and to serve well, so that when we get to the end of our lives, God can utter the words, can proclaim the words, "Well done, my good and faithful servant."